Brambles! You're going too fast for me.
Like, I would assume most people, I didn't play A Plague Tale Innocence when it first released. I vaguely remember it releasing near a lot of major releases, and yeah, it had a bit of a low-key release, and I didn't play it until just a year ago when it dropped on PS Plus and found the story and characters very engaging and the stealth gameplay very tense. Now with the sequel, A Plague Tale Requiem, Focus Entertainment had the opportunity to improve upon an already stellar original, and while gameplay-wise it is very similar, story-wise, which I think is the best aspect of this series, is definitely an improvement. But how? Well, let's get into it. Hi guys, DPX here reviewing today A Plague Tale Requiem. Before we get started, you know what to do. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell and leave a comment, or I will summon the rats.
What will we tell her?
The truth. We found what we came for, and I'm the one to blame.
Like I said, A Plague Tale Requiem is more or less the same as Innocence in terms of gameplay, but that's not particularly bad. I really like the stealth gameplay from the first game, and I didn't think there were too many flaws with it. Not that it's beyond criticism, you know, nothing is perfect and everything has room to improve, but you know what I mean. There isn't much combat, but instead, stealth sections. You have abilities, mainly throwing rocks at enemies, and sometimes you're able to sneak up on them, and sometimes you're able to stab them with a knife, or just take them out. But for the most part, it's all stealth gameplay, and while I believe stealth games have kind of been hit or miss, at least for the past few years, A Plague Tale manages to add a sense of dread to this stealth gameplay. There were times where I had to run from enemies or hide from them, and my heart was beating. Especially with the rats. Since this takes place during the bubonic plague, which I mentioned, or rather the Justinian plague, these rats are deadly. And that makes it all the more satisfying when you get the rats to completely murder an enemy. Honestly, my only real issue I have with the gameplay is I feel it's a little too similar to the first game. Not much has really changed. However, obviously it has a bigger budget, as it's a longer game and even looks like it has a much bigger budget, you know. While not really being too different in terms of gameplay, A Plague Tale Requiem is still a solid experience.
Should have seen it coming.
Honestly, when you play A Plague Tale, sure the gameplay is good and all, but you play it for the story. And honestly, I thought Innocence is one of the greatest hidden gems of all time, and most of that is the story. So Requiem had some big shoes to fill, but I'm happy to say that it fills it. Until something, but I'll get into that without spoilers. So this game takes place 6 months after A Plague Tale Innocence, and I don't want to get into spoilers like I just said, but I will say it builds upon the relationship between the siblings Amicia and Bruno de Rune, which was probably my favorite part of the story of the first game. You really buy their relationship, whether they are getting into fights or working together or just joking around. I said I wasn't going to spoil the story, but I will spoil the story of the first game, and all I'll say is, after the events of A Plague Tale Innocence with Bruno having the ability to control the rats, yeah, that's in here, and I love how that's not just an ability that he has, but it actually creates problems and conflicts between the characters. It's not just like, oh, go ahead, use your rat abilities. It's like, holy shit, what the fuck did you just do? There are certain deaths in this game as well that also took me by surprise. Try not to get too attached to these characters. I also love this version of Amicia, and how she is pretty much a full-on killer, but obviously killing enemies. My one issue with the story is the ending. It felt incredibly out of nowhere, and it wasn't really a satisfying note to end the game on. Sure, you can have a dark ending, I don't have a problem with that, and this ending isn't necessarily bad because of what happens, but like I said, it just felt abrupt. And while it is worth noting that there is a short epilogue chapter, it played after the credits rolled, so it feels more like a playable mid-credits scene. It was nice, but still. That's really my only issue with the story. We got interesting characters in here, characters that make some decisions that end up betraying our main characters, but you totally understand why they would make those decisions, and you also have a pretty solid villain too. Overall, a great story, but with a very abrupt ending. But overall, a great story.
How do we get to an island?
By boat, once we know where it is.
Do you think Mummy will be angry?
She won't be pleased, but don't worry.
This is the other stuff segment, the segment where I talk about other stuff worth mentioning, but not much to say on. Of course, as I usually mention in these reviews, the music. While nothing particularly slaps, the music fits the mood. In fact, if the soundtrack was filled with tracks that were absolute bops, it really wouldn't fit the mood of the game. Additionally, I also always talk about the visuals in this segment, and the visuals are great. I played on a PS5 and it totally seems like a great game for the next gen consoles. One weird thing though, not holding this against the game, but it's on pretty much every platform except for mobile, of course, but also PS4? I mean, there's even a Switch version. It's a cloud version, but I just find it bizarre that if you're a PlayStation player, your only option to play this game is on PS5. Again, not holding that against the game, as it really has nothing to do with the game, but I just find that weird. There was also talk about the frame rate. This came out pretty soon after the whole debacle with the Gotham Knights frame rate, and while I'm not a frame rate snob, and I tend to not give a shit about it unless it is very noticeable, and in the case of a Plague Tale Requiem, it's really not that noticeable. I mean, sure, there are some moments where the frame rate drops, and other moments where there are bugs that honestly fuck me up so badly, it makes me have to load from a checkpoint. But those were few and far between. A Plague Tale Requiem was a very smooth experience in more ways than one. A Plague Tale Requiem manages to improve upon an already stellar first game while keeping its charm and overall positives mostly intact. Sure, the gameplay has shockingly few changes from Innocence, the near-perfect story ends abruptly, and there are some bugs that really bugged me. I get it. But overall, with the otherwise stellar story and heart-beating stealth sections, A Plague Tale Requiem is certainly a sleeper hit of 2022. And if you got Xbox, this game is on Game Pass, so definitely check it out. In the end, I'm going to give A Plague Tale Requiem an 8.5 out of 10. So that was my review of A Plague Tale Requiem. Again, this is a very niche game, and I'm sure most of you didn't even play the original game. Like I said, for a while I didn't even play it. But it was one of my first games I had on the PS5, so I had to play it. But this is a very solid follow-up, and I'm actually very interested to see if they are going to continue this story, to see where it goes next. But anyways, what do you guys think of this game? If you've played it, let me know. Anyways, be sure to like the video, comment, subscribe, or I will send the rats at you, on you. Whatever. They are deadly rats, so just subscribe, alright? 500 subscriber special coming soon. Thanks, by the way. Bye!